Hello and welcome. My name is John Robson. I am the Infor dEPM evangelist, and it's my pleasure today to present to you the new generation of Infor's financial consolidation. A disclaimer first, the software hasn't actually been released, and for the reasons on that slide, you will see that we reserve the right to change our mind prior to the release of the software. Financial consolidation is an integral part of any enterprise performance management offering. And we already have actually 4 applications in that space, but for reasons we'll see on the next slide, we are releasing a new generation very soon. The session objectives for today, to give you a preview, I'm going to be presenting some screens in PowerPoint, but most of the screen function already exists in the software. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to be jumping into the software. Our aspiration is to release the initial version of the new software at the end of 2020, with certain function coming out in 2021. So the initial release will be with 12.0.11 of the dEPM application. For those of you already familiar with, say, the budgeting and planning module of dEPM, you'll find that there's a lot of consistency in the look and feel. For those of you already using Infor's current generation of consolidation based on the MIS stack, you'll find that we're using the version 11.2 data module, albeit with some enhancements for ease of migration. I mentioned that we've already got some offerings in the financial consolidation space. I can speak for 4 of them, FDC and MIS. They're both out of maintenance, but we still have customers occasionally contacting us asking for help or support. And we will try and provide that where it's practical. But as you'll appreciate, that software is 15 to 20 years old, so it's not always easy to do that. The software that most of our clients are running at the moment is CPM or dEPM, both of which are regularly maintained, but neither of which are having new feature function added to them. So our message from this presentation today is it's really time to think about moving forward onto the new generation. Why do we need a new generation? I think first and foremost, we want to support the multi-tenant cloud. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen clients go from saying cloud no thank you to cloud when can we move, and the most cost effective cloud offering is multi-tenant cloud, so that's what we're supporting with the new software. We also want to be able to support integration with Infor OS to get support for features like data lake and iron workflow. We want to support the version 12 platform, so the platform being the technology on which the application is built, because it offers better scalability and performance. And last but not least, we want to retire the legacy thick clients that come with our existing applications, things like Designer and Architect, but also Office Plus, the modeling tools and the Excel integration. The analysts tell us and our clients tell us that they don't want thick clients anymore, so we're replacing those components with web-based technology. I'm going to be talking next about some of the individual components, first of which is business modeling. Business modeling allows you to set up your application in the first place, to define your business objects like accounts, companies, segments, to manage the load of data through the data lake if you've got other info applications, or indeed manually if you're taking information in from text files. It allows you to set up calendars, to configure consolidation processes, to set things like the default accounts for cash flow, P&L, and balance sheet, the top level accounts, for instance. Here are some sample screens from business modeling, 3 little dashboards or widgets. The first one is activation of analysis segments. The second one is determining what the carry forward system accounts are. And the third one is setting up the schedule detail for movements for things like opening balances and retained earnings. Moving on, we have put into this software a monitoring screen that tells you whether various system checks have been met. And if those system checks have been met, whether or not you've locked the data. So the little padlock symbol there means that we lock the data. The little blue arrow means that that particular function is still open for the users to be able to enter data into the system. And this would be managed by the group accountant who can click to lock at an appropriate stage in the process. In the same vein, we've introduced something which, for want of a better term, I'm going to call the closed task monitor. We have two variants of that. We have it at the entity level, which we're looking at the moment. We also have it at the group level. Consolidation processes really require a bit of discipline. For instance, you don't want to run the consolidation itself until you've entered exchange rates. So there are various things you should do in a defined sequence. And previous versions of the software haven't really guided you through the sequence in which should do things. The new generation will basically guide you through the various processes and visually show you where you are in terms of those processes. Don't worry about a little bit of internal consistency on that screen. It's really just conveying the concept. A key point is that if there are some things that you need to do outside the system, which you wish to add to the closed task monitor, you can do that. So if you need sign off for something, put that on as a step. And when that step's been completed, update the status and move on to the next task. We've also got some integrity checking, as I've already alluded to. We check basically, do the debits equal the credits, but we can also check the consistency of data within the application. And the status of those consistency checks is illustrated by entity by a color-coded icon there. So green is good, red means you've got some work to do before you run the consolidation process. I mentioned that we had the closed task monitor at the group level. This is a sample screen at the group level. We previously saw the entity level. I want to talk next about currency exchange. To be a heavyweight consolidation solution, you need to support, as we do, weighted average, closing, and historical rates. We do that. We also support real-time currency conversion. So the moment you enter something into the system in local currency, it's automatically converted into group currency at the rate that you've set against the account. That'll be something perhaps of interest to CPM users who currently have to run a batch process to see numbers in group currencies. So here's an example screen. Again, don't look too hard at the data. It's just test data. We see data entered in local currency, translated into group currency. We show the conversion method. We show the exchange rate. And we show any calculated currency translation adjustment on the far right-hand side. The next topic to cover off briefly is ownership and control. In the software, any entity can hold shares in any other entity. Depending on the ownership and control, the system will suggest a consolidation method. So we support full with recognition of minority interest as appropriate. We also support joint ventures and add equity. And this screen is where you would enter the data, but the system would also suggest a consolidation method that you can override if you don't like what the system comes up with. This is a data visualization for the ownership and control within a defined group. And it's designed to deal with complex groups. So we very often see 5, 6, even 7 levels of ownership in a group these days. And the idea is that you can start with a group and you can navigate round to see who owns shares in whom and what the percentages are, what the effective control are. I can't show you this today in the software, but I'm looking forward very much to seeing this when it's released. We also are able to show you the status of checking, things like the reconciliation of intercompany payables and receivables. So this status monitor shows you whether the checks, they're not integrity checks on the data loaded, there are integrity checks on the consistency between entities. So does my receivable equal your payable? A visual indicator of that status here. You'll also see here our new journal entry capabilities. So what you will see is that it's very highly configurable. So we can determine, for instance, what columns are going to be shown. It's very interactive. So the plus sign allows me to drill down and see the details of a journal. I can create a new journal at the company or the group level. I can also group my journals by category so that I can quickly compare and contrast and check for completeness and consistency. Here's an example of journal creation. I'll show you that live in the software, so I won't dwell on that. Let's talk next about the consolidation processes. We provide some out-of-the-box consolidation processes that will work for probably 90% of clients, but where appropriate, customers can add processes or even modify the standard ones in a controlled way. Here's the process execution monitor for consolidation processes. It shows you what processes should be run, who has run the processes, when, how long it took, and whether it's completed or running. Once we have run the consolidation, we can jump into reporting. Here's an example of a report, in this case, a balance sheet report. And again, you can see how configurable it is in terms of scaling, number of decimals, zero suppression, adding comparatives, etc. So moving a long way beyond what's offered in the current software. I'm now going to move on to a software demonstration. I'll just pause briefly to move into the web browser. I've opened up the application in a web browser, in this case Chrome, and jumped into business modeling. Within business modeling, I can do things like configure my calendar. So you can see here that I'm saying the model starts in 2020, runs through to the end of 2022. I've allowed 2 years for the current year and 1 prior year comparative. And by the way, the start period is July. If I expand modules and consolidation, you'll see that I get various configuration tabs like core here. The little red warning tells me that my configuration isn't completed. I've done my groups, entities, schedules, but in this case, my account configuration isn't complete. All I would need to do is jump to accounts to finish that configuration. Moving on to business objects are things like currencies, accounts, etc. So if I want to set up a new entity as an example, I would simply click on entity. I would see that I have an existing entity 101. You would note that I have an add button up here. Add's going to bring me up a dialog. The system wants to know code, description, and currency. Little red asterisk means that something is mandatory. I can click on the list to choose a value. So I can choose US dollars, for instance. I won't actually save that. You may be wondering where the currencies came from. It's actually the next menu item, but if I couldn't find it, I can just type in CURR in the menu search. I would get currencies. You would see that I'd activated these 3 currencies. To activate another one, I would simply click on the plus sign. Last but not least, within business modeling, I get the manage model option. If I expand that, when I'm done with my changes, I get the option of hitting publish model. That publishes any changes I've made since I last used business modeling to OLAP. Jumping back to the home menu, we see that we get a whole new menu option for financial applications. Those of you who are familiar with budgeting and planning will be familiar with the task menu. As an FYI, for users who are mainly consolidators, we'll be offering a different home page, but regardless, we will still offer things like favorites. So for instance, I wanted to launch my group parameters. I would simply hit the link on the favorites bar there. That will take me into group parameters. Those of you familiar with the existing dEPM consolidation application will recognize the questions. So we've got a couple of groups defined here: group currencies, euros, the parent entity is RU1, etc. We got a scaling factor of 1 for the numbers. So pretty straightforward and familiar questions. Let's have a look also at the parameterization of entities. So if I expand parameterization, going to parameterization of entity, entity parameter, very similar look and feel to the group parameters, a list of entities specifying things like currencies, translation method, scaling factor, and default segments. So quite similar to version 11 in as you may expect. Jumping forward, I just comment on the menu briefly. The financial consolidation module and the options you see within it will only apply to people who have the correct authorizations to use it. Let's have a look next at workflow. We said got a workflow monitor here, and I mentioned earlier entity and group status monitor. Let's look at the entity screen. I mentioned earlier on that this is configurable, so power users can add additional tasks. You will see here the tasks that should be done by entity and the status for each of these items. Let's look next at journaling. As a power user, I can jump straight to a menu option, bypassing the menu if I wish. So I can go into journal list. Here I can see existing posted journals, and I can enter new journals. It's the first time I've been into this screen, so I need to just tell the system what my selection parameters are. And hopefully we find some existing journals. Pretty much just picking the first one in every case. Yep, I've hit lucky. There are some test journals here. To see existing journals, I can just hit on the plus sign. That will show me the double entry. If there is segmental information, the plus sign again will show me the segmental information. To add a new journal, I would simply hit plus, and the system says, tell me what sort of journal you want to create. Is it an entity journal or is it a group journal? And this is fully web enabled. Last but not least, let's just touch upon reporting. And we have a whole series of reports under financial consolidation. We just collapse the menu a little bit. We have entity reports and group reports. Let's pick an entity report. Let's say we want to look at our entity income statement, for instance. I've made some selections previously, so the system is showing me my profit and loss. It's drillable. I can hit on the little symbol there to expand the level of detail. I can do things like suppress zeros, at which point my minority interest is going to go away because there is none. I can configure what columns appear, like account number and account description. I can also, if I wish, add a comparative. So at the moment, I'm just looking at 1 year. If I want a prior comparative, I can go into analysis. I can control scaling and decimals. I've got export options as well. So these reports are much more functional than the ones they replace in the existing dEPM consolidation. Well, I'm out of time, so that's the end of my presentation today. I'd like to thank you very much for attending.